to Social Bell. I'm Josh.
And I'm Brad, and today we have a very special guest with us from one of our Nasdaq listed companies, Cisco, Kati Dahm. Thank you for coming in and being with us on Social Bell today.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So just to jump right in, we would love to know a little bit more about your background. What do you do at Cisco?
So I'm on our corporate social media team, which means we manage all of our corporate social channels. So that's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, even Snapchat, and Periscope.
Nice.
In addition to that, too, we also manage our corporate newsroom, which is where we hold articles, press releases, and other content related to Cisco.
So what is it that makes social at Cisco unique?
I think one of the main things is the approach that we take with our content that we share on our corporate channels. I'm sure you've heard the term brand journalism. It's really blowing up right now. And I think it's a really great way for brands to insert themselves into the industry conversation without seeming too obvious. I'd say our biggest example is we have writers on staff from Fortune and Forbes and other tech and business publications that are able to contribute content for us to share that doesn't necessarily mention Cisco, but also really gives us a place in the thought leadership area in the broader industry conversation in tech.
That's really cool. How did you build out that content network?
We worked with writers that we'd had relationships with before to ask them if they were interested in contributing articles to the network, and they were. So we kind of got them into a group, and they will pitch stories to us on a weekly basis, and then that is integrated into our content strategy on sharing on our corporate social channels. So in addition to sharing that content, we're also making sure we highlight all corporate events, priorities, news, announcements, etc.
Awesome.
It's really awesome.
Yeah.
So another thing that we realized that you guys do incredibly well is how you've built your executive leadership on Twitter and on social media. How do you promote your leaders at Cisco on social?
So we love getting our leaders on Twitter and LinkedIn. We've found that that's really where their audience is, and our audience is, for that matter. It's a very business and tech friendly audience. And we're able to get our leaders to both be spokespeople for the company as well as build their own personal brand on those channels. We've gotten a lot of really great engagement. I think one most notable example was recently we announced a new CEO that's going to be taking the role of CEO on July 26th, Chuck Robbins. And I think he started with we had started building his social profile, and it was probably around 900 followers or so. But that first week after he was announced as being CEO and he started tweeting and he really started taking the reins and sharing his profile himself, I think he's up to almost 5,000 followers now.
Wow, that's
So he's
great.
really built a following, and people have really seen, and he's really built his profile as the new CEO. So when he takes his new role in July, he's going to really have that following already, and he's really going to have an established platform and be able to really contribute to the industry conversation too.
What advice would you have for a company that's trying to build out their executives' leadership, their Twitter profile or their LinkedIn page?
I think if you can focus on a few main objectives, so what you're trying to communicate, and if you can narrow those down to 3 or 4 things, I think that's going to be really helpful in really determining your content strategy, so to speak, but also your social strategy. If you can tie everything back to those 3 or 4 objectives, then I think that's going to be really the foundation of building out your profile as a company, and then that's what you can tie your executive profiles to too.
Even moreover, we've noticed, when it's time for financial press releases and earnings to come out, you guys have a really good visibility and presence as far as communicating and engaging actively with some of your communities there. What can you tell us about, how that started up and some of those tips that you would pass along to other companies who are looking to do the same?
So with earnings, we noticed in our fiscal year 2014, there was no conversation from Cisco around earnings, and partially because we were hesitant about it. I think that talking about financial anything is generally a very sensitive area for companies because there are a lot of regulations, et cetera. But we did notice that a lot of our audience, so that was media, media analysts, investors, were talking about our earnings on Twitter. And so we realized that might be a place where we could potentially guide the conversation around our earnings and draw people back to kind of the key points and key takeaways of our earnings calls. So we decided to start live tweeting our earnings calls. we approve the script with legal and investor relations beforehand, and then we're able to announce our key points of earnings in real time in conjunction with those earnings calls, so you don't have to call into the conference call itself.
Wow.
And we found that's been very it's been helpful for our analysts and media that don't necessarily want to call in to the call itself, but would like to follow the conversation too. And then we find too that people are more likely to retweet and to share those points that we're sharing about our earnings call, and that gets us out there and guiding the conversation versus having other outlets or media, et cetera, guiding the conversation.
That's awesome. And so how do you get responses from journalists on Twitter in reaction to those, or it's more of a sharing rather than a conversation?
So I wouldn't necessarily say responses, but it's more of a sharing, but they do use the assets we put out there. So we have a graphic that we share with key takeaways from our CEO, John Chambers, and that gets shared usually upwards of 90 times when we share that. And those are like the high key points that he's taken away from earnings. So whether we're performing well in a tough market or whatever else, I think it's the high level overview of what really guides what press or what influencers may be wanting to hear from our earnings.
I think that graphic with key points is like an awesome thing to do and great advice for any company trying to do earnings on Twitter.
We found it's been very successful, and I think graphics in general, though, too, I think works so well on Twitter, too. But I think we were trying to make our earnings call easier to digest for people, too, because otherwise, I think for myself at least, I'm like, there's a bunch of numbers on here. I don't really get what it means. I wasn't an accounting major, so.
Absolutely. I mean, and you're right. It's about making that material accessible.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've coupled those two things together very well, accessibility and digestibility within the social realms. I mean, that sounds like two key takeaways that any company could use if they were trying to really boost their brand and its earnings communications throughout social. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, from all of us at Social Bell, Katie, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Cisco.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.